I brought mine too. So hi guys. Since it's the third day of the summit, I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you already. But for those of you who don't know me, I am Anna Warner. I am the Senior Manager of CRM and Email at SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. How many people here have been to a SeaWorld? Oh wow, a lot. That's great. Thank you. And if you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'm at Anna Warner. That's Anna with one N. And just to correct Steve, I'm not a Floridian. I do live in Florida, but I'm a proud Texan, born and raised. I've only lived in Florida for a year, so I had to just mention that.
Texas never dies, right?
Never.
Yeah, and my name is Phil Herbert. I am the email marketing manager for HP, and I am in charge of our U.S. consumer emails. And so that's my focus is on the B2C side of the business. And you can find me at Phil_Herbert at Twitter if you want dog photos and baseball stuff, mostly.
All right, let's hope this works. So a little more about my background. You know, I mentioned I'm with SeaWorld, which some of you might know. We actually have 12 parks under the SeaWorld umbrella. We have 3 SeaWorlds, 2 Busch Gardens parks, each of which has a connected water park. And then we also have Sesame Place, which is a Sesame Street theme park up in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. And that is the only park I haven't been to, and I'm going in 2 weeks, and I'm really excited. Before I came to SeaWorld, just a year ago, almost to the date, I spent about a decade in retail marketing, working for some really cool brands, which you can see up here, one of which is Under Armour, and my Under Armour colleague is in the house, Jay DeFore. I want to shout out to him. Used to work with him, great guy. So as we talk about the inbox experience today throughout the presentation, I'll show not only some examples of how I've approached, and my team and colleagues from my past have approached the inbox experience at SeaWorld, but also from some of these brands as well.
Yeah, and I've been at HP for just about 6 months now, and before that I was actually agency side, and so I got to work with a lot of different clients, like you can see up there, but really focusing on the strategy and technical implementation side of things. So data strategy, content strategy, things like that.
All right.
Yeah, so this is going to be fairly informal. I hope I have a list of questions for Anna that we'll start with. Actually, one of the things as we have been talking that is really interesting, I thought, is even though we're in really separate industries and selling separate products and experiences, we're similar in a way that we have really long sales cycles, in that our customers can go years between making purchases with us. And so I wanted to start off with just talking a little bit about how do you keep your customers engaged with SeaWorld and with your brand over that long period of time?
Yeah, so that's definitely true. We have, although we have at SeaWorld, and I use SeaWorld to represent all of our 12 parks, but we have a very loyal and active past member base that does visit very frequently and does like more frequent engagement. However, we also have families who, coming to some of our parks is a very big deal for their family, and they plan it out months, if not years in advance. Our Orlando location is a perfect example of that. And then likewise, we have people who, once they visit, they might not visit again for many years, if ever, because they just don't live near one of our locations. So how do you, it's an important question is how do we manage that in both cases? So I have a couple of examples of how, in my past, we've driven engagement between that purchase cycle, whether somebody is gearing up to make the purchase or they've already made the purchase and now they're in the sort of retention phase of the customer life cycle. And so I think about driving engagement a few different ways. And the first thing I think about is there any way that we can tell a story? Can we add value by telling a story? And one of our recent examples of how we've done that at SeaWorld is with stories about our animals, because there's a very real, visceral, emotional connection that people have with our animals. And they don't necessarily want a relationship with us as a brand, but with our animals that they either are planning to meet when they visit one of our locations, or that they have just met during one of their trips. And so Ginger and Aku are our baby walruses that live at the Wild Arctic exhibit in our SeaWorld Orlando Park. If you haven't been out there to meet them, I highly recommend it. So Ginger, and I can't remember who's who in this picture, but Ginger was the first baby walrus born at SeaWorld Orlando. I want to say it was mid last year. And then Aku was actually a baby walrus stranded off the coast of Alaska, who was rescued and determined not fit to be returned back to the wild, did not think that he would survive. And so SeaWorld made a home for him. And now Ginger and Aku are about the same age and are growing up together, and they're best friends. And you can see them in the exhibit playing with their toys and swimming around, and it's really inspiring. And so we know that our customers don't want to constantly be sold to. They want to hear a story, and they want to know about our animals' lives. And so Ginger and Aku, I think, is a great example of how we've incorporated storytelling into our email program. And then, at other brands where we didn't have that kind of easy emotional tie-in, no animals, we encouraged sharing. How can you make your customer a part of your brand story? We did that a lot at Fossil, where we would ask people to, share on Instagram, show us your Fossil style, #FossilStyle, and we would send this out right after somebody made a purchase and ask them to showcase their product. And I checked last night, Fossil Style has actually had about 78,000 tags on Instagram, which is pretty impressive, and the word of mouth behind that has revenue implications that are hard to necessarily quantify, but certainly I think we could all agree there are there's got to be a positive revenue outcome to that type of word of mouth via social media. So that's another way that we drive engagement throughout the purchase cycle, or after the purchase cycle. And then I wanted to showcase a couple of things that we did when I was at Charming Charlie, which the men in the room might not appreciate, but hopefully the women will. Because men, these really are things that we as women sometimes think about. So, how do you style a basic tee? There's all these different t-shirt options, accessories options. If you aren't familiar with Charming Charlie, by the way, they're an accessories retailer, have about, I think 300 stores in the United States. So when I was at Charming Charlie, I partnered with our social media and content teams, and we said, how can we teach our customers something? We know that our visitation is roughly 4 times a year, and yes, we want to make that more frequent, but our customers never going to come once a week to Charming Charlie. So how do we keep them part of our brand? And so we partnered together on some learning opportunities. So how to style a basic tee. This was actually one of the most engaged with campaigns that we sent during my tenure there, far beyond any engagement we saw on a sales-focused email campaign. And then the neckline cheat sheet was also extremely popular. And I know it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but nowhere on these emails does it say, buy now, shop now, buy some t-shirts, buy some necklaces. It says, click here to see more styling options, or click here to get the neckline cheat sheet. So we really were trying to help people, both who had already purchased and were thinking about purchasing, help them, add value to their lives and learn how to make styling easier for them. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really jealous of how much content you guys have at SeaWorld to work with. I had a small agency, or at my last agency, we had a small client that was like a regional aquarium, and anytime they needed to get like some Instagram engagement, they would just find a picture of their otters, and they'd get like 200,000 likes on their pictures of the otter, and just like, man, I wish.
I know.
I wish computers were that furry. That's a good. So I think one thing that I loved from, I'm pretty sure it was Sheila Stoneham said on Monday, and I wrote it down, was this idea of the pinball machine instead of the funnel. And how does all the content and all the social things you guys are creating fit in with email and create, your holistic marketing strategy?
Yeah, so I thought you'd ask me that, so I created a slide for it. So, this is really just to represent what we all already know, what we've been talking about for the past 3 days, which is putting the customer at the heart of or at the center of your brand. And that means that you have to connect all of your channels together, whether digital or offline, because the customer does not see you as a channel. The customer sees you as a brand. And so you don't want to create disjointed experiences across your omni-channel ecosystem. And so if I go back to the SeaWorld example with Ginger and Aku, that email that I showed you actually links to a blog story where you can learn more about Ginger and Aku, their background, their relationship, what they like to do during the day, and then you can actually follow Ginger on Twitter and on Instagram if you want to see what she's up to on a daily basis. Her and Aku. If anybody's interested, it's Twitter is, I want to say, Gingers, GINGERS _squad. And Instagram is gingers_feed, and I might have reversed those, but you'll find it. And so that's just one example of how email sometimes is a doorway into your other digital channels. And we've found, between I'll just go back for a second. But between linking to our blog from the SeaWorld example here, or linking to our Instagram and the fossil example here, you are impacting what you're doing, the success of your other digital channels outside of email in a potentially very big way. And I also, would recommend, if you're not already doing so, depending on how your various departments are structured, if you're not working with your social teams, if you're not working with your direct mail team, your media display, whatever, you start doing that. Have conversations with them, understand what they're focusing on, make sure they know what you're focusing on, and have conversations around how you can integrate. That's the most valuable thing that I've done in my career, is making sure everybody had a seat at the table as we were planning out our editorial calendars and make sure we were leveraging each other in really powerful ways. So, what
are some of the first steps you take? That's something actually we struggle with at HP because we're so big and distributed, is coordinating all of the brand marketing and the display and the email. So how do you start those conversations?
Plan a meeting. When you're ready to chart out your email calendar for the month or quarter or however you do it, plan meetings with those people and have the conversation, start a conversation, and make that part of your just planning process throughout the year. And you'll start to learn from each other, and your partners, so your social media partners, for instance, will see the value that you're starting to add to their programs through the email channel. We did an email at Charming Charlie similar to what I showed earlier, but it was all about how to tie a scarf, and it linked to Pinterest and showed all these different variations of scarf tying, which again, men, I know you don't get it, but this is important to some of us females. And it grew our Pinterest following exponentially in one day, the day that email went out. So you better believe my social team wanted to partner with us as much as possible after that.
That's awesome. So you say, when you talk about that email could be the doorway in, what do you want that experience like for your subscribers in the inbox? So what do you want the inbox experience to be like?
I think the word that comes to mind is valuable. I want to be providing value, and I honestly believe if every single email that you send is trying to sell something, you're doing it wrong. Unless maybe you're Amazon or Walmart, where people buy from you all the time. People don't want an email from you every day or every week with you trying to sell. And they also, even when you are trying to sell them something, people want to feel like you know who they are. I think somebody mentioned earlier that their bank called them by dear customer name, which is crazy in this day of big data, and we have so much information at our fingertips, almost too much, according to the government. So I think one example that I wanted to share with the group, and hopefully my Under Armour friend won't mind if I can get it to work.
Oh, I think he left, so we're good.
Oh, he did? Oh, I gave him a shout out and everything. Okay. So know your customer so you can deliver relevancy and value. And so this is an example from when I was at Under Armour, and these are snippets that I pulled out from email campaigns that were sent. I think it was right before my time there. And so if you look at these, it's really hard to tell who they're trying to target, right? So you could send these emails to virtually anybody. I see kind of women featured, I see men, I see kids, I see hunting. It's really a one-size-fits-all approach here. And Under Armour was not getting the results that they wanted out of the email program. So what we did was said, okay, obviously we are not providing enough value to our customer through our email channel. So what do? So I sat down with our analytics team, and luckily Under Armour had an amazingly talented analytics team, and we dug into our consumer and their buying patterns and found personas, five or six, I want to say, different personas based on what we knew about our customer and how they were transacting with us and what they were purchasing. And so you'll see if you go through Under Armour emails over time that we evolved from this one size fits all to something that looked more like, wait for it, like this. So much more segmented, much easier to understand who we're trying to target. So you don't see a kind of hodgepodge of a bunch of different products because we really don't know who you are, and we're just going to throw everything at you so that maybe you'll buy something. Instead, we know that you're a male and you only buy for men and you buy running gear. So we're going to show you a running email with a man running. Likewise for women, we're going to show you an email of women. And so we actually, within, I want to say 6 months, saw a 46% increase in email revenue from going from that one size fits all to targeted and relevant. So it's proof that it works. And it wasn't that hard to do, honestly. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying value and relevancy is what I want the inbox experience to be for my customer, no matter what brand I'm with. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the last question I had is almost the opposite of that, which is how important do you find that the experience in the inbox is to the overall brand itself? And so how do you think about the inbox as part of the brand?
Yeah,
touched on some of this
yeah,
already,
I think it's everything we already talked about, and somebody mentioned earlier today. I mean, email it's permission based, which makes it extremely important, and it brings on a great responsibility for us as email marketers because somebody has kind of invited us to their home. In a way, and they can also rescind that invitation at any time. So we have to use, there's this quote, with great power comes great responsibility, and that's how I view somebody giving me their email address. That comes with responsibility, and it's kind of a contract that says I as a customer, I'm going to give you access into my life, and you as a brand that I want to have a relationship with are going to provide value to me. And so that's kind of how I think about it, and I try to put the customer let them have a seat at the table in all the decisions that we're making from an email perspective. So
Nice.
All right, can I ask you some questions?
Yes.
All right.
This is a total surprise. I didn't know. This was gonna happen.
So HP, very different from SeaWorld, but I'm sure a lot of similar challenges and opportunities. So how do you know, I talked a lot about how I think about the inbox experience. How does HP think about the inbox experience?
Yeah, we think about it, I think, similarly to how we've been talking about, but it looks a little bit different from an execution standpoint. And so when we have customers that go a year or 2 years or 3 years between purchases, we need to walk this really fine line between keeping ourselves front of mind to them when they're ready, and over contacting them to the point where they're going to leave and we're not going to be there when they're ready to upgrade their computer. And so we do a lot of work on that level with our cadence control and the amount of email that we're sending people, and letting how they're interacting with us sort of define how much they get from us. And so we have people we just call business as usual. These are our most engaged people. They're opening every email, they're clicking things. And we, send them almost every single email that we send until they get to the point where they're not engaging, because we know these are the people who are probably ready to buy and are trying to soak up offers and product and value information that we're giving them. And so if they're not engaging, then we bump them down. We actually have multiple levels, but to simplify, we call them semi-engaged. And so they get an email from us once a week or once a month, and we tailor what we send to them based on knowing that they're only getting something once a month. And then it goes all the way down to who we consider non-engaged, and those are the people who are just kind of in the lull of that purchase cycle. And so we're only really contacting them once a quarter, just to kind of stay relevant and stay front of mind, and say, hey, when you're ready to start researching your next computer, your next printer, don't forget about us, basically. And then when we see them engaging with the email from one of those lower engagement groups, we start bumping them up, and we start increasing that cadence until they've told us that they're ready to purchase, and so they're getting all the emails that we're sending to that group. And then the second thing we really think about is, how do we appear to subscribers who aren't opening our emails? And so there's some value to just having our email show up in the inbox and not being opened. And so what can we do from our subject lines, our from names, to let those people get just a sense of what we're doing? So if they're seeing product launches and sales and new things coming out from us, even if they're not opening and they're not actively searching out that information, there's still this like background noise from us, and they get a sense of what's happening and what's going on. And then the last thing is sort of our philosophy on how we implement change in email. So if someone's only opening an email from us every 6 months or every year, it still needs to feel connected to the last email that they opened 6 months or a year ago. So if we're rapidly changing the way our emails look, or how we're talking to people, or the way we talk about product, it's not going to connect back. So when we send the emails to these less engaged groups, we take a more conservative approach while still trying to stay relevant. So, maybe an email that would feel familiar on a desktop 2 years ago, we need to make sure it's working on a phone, but still feels kind of the same. But then for our more engaged audience, we can have more rapid iteration as far as design and content, and try more things, because they're going to be able to keep up, and that's not going to feel weird.
Yeah. So you talked about kind of managing frequency and cadence based on open activity and things like that. Do you allow your customer to kind of self-manage the inbox experience anyway?
Yeah, one of the big things that we've done to keep people in the flow is to make sure we have a good opt-down page as part of our unsubscribe process. And so we give people the option to tell us how often we would like to talk to, or they would like us to talk to them. And we see a really high percentage of people who visit our unsubscribe page instead opted down to a level of communication. And so when they do that, we actually honor where they're at till they tell us they want more. So if they only want to be once a quarter or once a month, we actually honor that, even if their engagement would suggest otherwise.
Interesting. So I talked a little bit about how we approached customer segmentation at Under Armour. How are you guys thinking about customer segmentation?
Yeah, so we have a really small team, and so we think about segmentation in a couple of ways. We have to drive value, but we also have to think about it from an opportunity cost standpoint. So what does it cost us to create segments and create versions of emails? Because the time that we have to spend on each email is a big factor in the return we get on it. And so a lot of what we do is create segments of purchasers, test them in our consumer group, and then we transition that into like a lifestyle trigger email or something like that, where it can be more automated. So as we build a segment, we test the proof of concept as a segment of our main consumer base, and then we try and find the logic that would help us automate out into that segment. So if we find a group of PC purchasers, for example, who we know are primed to repurchase, or someone who's about ready to buy ink, we want to make an automated email that's going to hit that segment at the right time, so we don't have this huge burden on our small team and our small production team, and to hit a really small part of our audience.
Right. Last question. So is there any other thing, you talk about how you're segmenting, how you kind of manage preferences. Is there any other thing outside of the customer experience that impacts how you think about the inbox?
Yeah, I think Bart was talking a little bit about this earlier, but we have to make sure we do all the fundamentals really well, because we have a very short window of time to reconvert a customer. So we spend a lot of time on things like deliverability. And making sure all of our deliverability is up to date. We make sure that our scores are well above industry average, because if we lose them because it's not getting in the inbox, it's going to be another couple of years before we get another chance to get them back. And the same with unsubscribes. So that's where the cadence control really helps keep our unsubscribes down. And then the last thing is from an email business, we have a little bit different goals than a big publicly traded business who runs on a quarterly budget cycle. And so we're always trying to not only think about like what our quarterly revenue is, but for a lot of these tests we're doing and a lot of the ways we're implementing our program, we need to be measuring the ROI across a lot longer of a time frame than people normally would. And so if we have a couple year purchase cycle, anything we do that hurts our list this quarter for a short-term gain, we're going to feel those impacts for 2 years. Yeah. And so when we do tests and when we think about our program, we have to think about it on this really long cycle. And there's always a trade-off. Like sometimes it's worth kind of burning your list a little bit, but sometimes it's not. And so we have to make that business decision and push back against categories when they want to be like, well, let's just send one more email. We're like, well, that's going to cost us 2,000 subscribers or something, and that's big to us, even with a huge list.
Cool.
Anna and Phil, I want to thank you for ending us on an event that was really all about customer first email, and bringing us back to the customer experience. Thanks.